Well, hello, welcome again to read through of Romans, and I'm in chapter 1. I got up to verse 24. Dio paraido ken autus o theos entais epithumiais ton cardion auton es akathasian to atimadzeste adesestai ta somata auton en autois. Dio, of course, for dia plus hot, for which reason, on account of which, God. Now be careful here, we get this verb paradidomi, and then the idiom, it goes with the ace, not the n. And you'll see this expression again in verses 26 and 28, the same usage. So he gave them over to. So the train of thought seems to be that idolatry leads to social disharmony. The notion that the Gentiles were wholly abandoned by God was a Jewish concept. So for which reason God gave them over, so take this bit first, in the desires of their hearts, God gave them over to akathasian, impurity. Now we get to plus this infinitive, and this is often taken as middle, but there are no other examples of this verb in the middle. I think then it's safer to take it as passive here. And take this as the subject of the infinitive. And the to plus the infinitive for purpose, so that their bodies were dishonoured among them, in other words, among themselves. Others take it so to dishonour their bodies, but I think it's more natural to take this as passive, so that their bodies were dishonoured in our choice, well, among them, we'd say among themselves perhaps, or among them. Hoitines met elaxan tenalathean to theou ento pseudae, kai esebastesan kai elatrusan te ktisei paraton ktisanta hos estin eulogetus estus ionas. Amen. They who, I mentioned before, we have this idiom here, met alasso and then en, to exchange for. So they exchanged the truth of God, ento pseudo, for falsehood. And now the normal verb here is sebamai. This is from sebasdomai, or sebasdo, which is only occurs here, but it's just a variation on sebamai, to show reverence for. And it's probably it's passive, but it's probably deponent here. It's a middle verb here being used in the past tense, often goes into the passive. So they showed reverence for, and latruo is to worship, and it takes a dative. So they showed reverence for and they worshipped the creation, the ktisis, the declension feminine abstract noun. Para, it's almost passing by the ktisanta, the creator. This is from ktisdo. Ktisdo is a verb meaning to found, to set up, to create. So it's almost here they showed religious respect for, and they served the creation, often translated rather than, but it's almost passing by or to the neglect of the creator, who is eulogetos, who is blessed, estus ionas, literally to the ages, so forever. Amen. Dia tuto par edo ken autus hotheos es pathe artemias. Hai tega thelei auton met elaxan ten fusican cresin, es ten parafusin, homoios tekai hoi arsenes afentes ten fusican cresin tes theleas, ex ekauthesan en te orexe auton, eis allelus arsenes en arsesin, tein asgemosunein cat ergadzomenoi kai ten antimisthian hein ede tes planes autun enhiautois apolambanontes. It's a long sentence here. Dear tutor, on account of this, now again, the context here is all in terms of religious observance. So God, and it's this paradidemi plus eis, handed them over to pathe artemias, literally desires which are of dishonor. This is a sort of this is a Hebraic expression. You often use the noun plus a genitive, so it's often translated as dishonorable passions, but it's literally passions of dishonor because that's the way you would do it in Hebrew. Hebrew has a scarcity of hasn't got a huge number of adjectives, and so if you want to say dishonest passions, then you need an adjective, and so Hebrew says passions of dishonor, so it uses two nouns, this one in the constructs, or this in the construct state, so using the genitive here. So to dishonorable passions is what it means. For, so we get a te here connecting te and, so it's almost for also, their theleoi, their females of them, so perhaps the women, the females of them, and we get met a lasso plus, now here we get it with eis, but eis and en are interchangeable really. So they exchanged tein fusican kresin. Now kresis is often used of sexual practice, sexual intercourse. So literally the natural sexual intercourse, they exchanged it for that which is paraphusin, that which is contrary to nature. Now just a word here about this. The meaning is really not quite as clear, I think, as some would claim. Firstly, lesbianism, which is it's often taken to refer to lesbianism, but that's very rarely referred to in antiquity. There are some references, but they're quite rare. And there's most likely a reference here to natural sexual practices, as opposed to more perhaps exotic sexual practices that were seen as somehow abnormal. I think rather that Paul again may have temple prostitution in mind. This would link back to the earlier theme of idolatry, and it would fit in with what's in the Wisdom of Solomon. Ritual temple prostitution by both sexes was practiced in ancient times. Indeed, as you probably know, Hebrew has two different words for prostitute. There is zoner, meaning a garden variety prostitute, and there is another word, kedeshah, meaning a holy one, which is used of a temple prostitute. So this was practiced in ancient times by both sexes, and this this shows perhaps the connection between ritualized sexual activity and religious worship. Interestingly, to compare the injunction in Acts 15:20, where James allows the uncircumcised Gentiles to remain in that state, provided they refrain from, the worship of idols, from porneia, prostitution, where the worship of idols is connected with prostitution, from eating things that are strangled, and from blood. The phrase paraphusin does occur in classical Greek. It's in Euripides' Phoenissae, line 395, if you're interested in looking it up, where he says, for the sake of gain, one must become a slave, paraphusin, against one's true nature. In other words, people changing what is their true nature. And I should just point out that Paul and people in antiquity generally had no notion of sexual orientation, this concept was only formally defined in the late 18th century, I believe. So this does require quite a bit of unpacking, and I'll leave it to others to say more about this here. But this may, I think, the overlay of all of this section, I think, is to be read in the context of temple prostitution. Homoios tekai, and likewise also their men, the males, hentes, having left the natural sexual intercourse with women, I think is the right way of translating that. Ekauthesan, they were burnt. It's an aorist passive. The verb is ex plus kaio, to burn. In the aorist, it's ekausa. You get a vowel gradation. This is the aorist passive. So they were burned in the orexis. Orexis means the stretching out for, and hence desire. So in their desire with regard to one another. Arsenes en arsesin. This is males among males. This is the dative plural. The nominative is arsene, and arsenos, genitive. So males among males. Kat ergazomenoi, or something like practicing that which is unseemly. It's alpha privative plus the schema sune. So practicing unseemliness. And now we've got to go down to the participle apolambonontes. So it's receiving ten antimisthean, the penalty. It's the reward you get in return. So it's the penalty. The noun only here, by the way, in the New Testament and in 2 Corinthians 6. Not used outside of Christian literature. So having received the penalty among themselves, the penalty for their error, and the penalty which it was necessary understand to receive. So this little hein ede, I think, is parenthetical almost. So having received the penalty which it was necessary to receive, understood, the penalty for, with this genitive, their error among themselves. Kai kathos uk edokimasan ton theon ekain en epignose. Per edoken autus theos eis adokimon nun poien ta me kathikonta. Now I'm going to pause there because we get a very long list coming up here. Dokimazdo is to try something out, to test it out. It's funny that they're using that expression here. And we've got a bit of a pun here. Paul likes to have these linguistic puns. He's got dokimazdo and then adokimos here, the negative of it. So dokimazdo is to make trial of, to put to the test. Slightly have to stretch the meaning a little bit here. So what was the previous? So, and just as they did not think it fitting perhaps to hold God in full knowledge. They didn't really look deeply enough. They didn't see fit to have a full knowledge of God, is a paraphrase of this here. They did not properly investigate how God might be fully perceived, to expand this a little bit. And God gave them, and then there's that paradidomi plus ace idiom again, handed them over to an adokimon nun. Adokimos is the sense of not having passed the test, and hence worthless or base. It's a word can be used of coinage. So if you've got a dud coin that looks like it's gold, but in fact it's not, then that was called adokimos. It was counterfeit almost, worthless or base. It didn't pass the test. So God gave them over to, often translated as reprobate, but it means worthless or base mind in the sense of not passing the test. to do that which is not kathekonta, that which is not fitting, morally fitting. The Stoics talked about to kathekon, one's duty. So to do that which was not fitting. Now we get a great long list. Paul is very fond of these lists of sins and things. So here we have it. Pepleromenus, parseadikia, poneria, pleonexia, kakia, mestus, phthonu, eridos, dulu, kakoetheas, psithoristas, katalalus, theostoges, hubristas, huperephanus, alazontas, ephuratus kakon, gonius in apathes, asunetus, asunthetus, astorgos, an liamonas. So I'll pause there, I think. And he changes the different things. So it's having been filled with, and then we get a list of things in the dative, and then he changes it to mestus plus the genitive, full of, and then he changes it to just accusative plurals. So just by way of variation. So having been filled with all unrighteousness, poneria, wickedness, pleonexia is greed. It's pleon, meaning more, and the X here is connected with echo, sort of grabbing or holding more, grabbing more. So greed, kakia is ill will or malice, wickedness, or something like that. Kakia, often just ill will or malignity. Then he changes it from mestus plus the genitive, so full of, and we get lots of puns here. So he's got phthonu and phonu. He does it on purpose. They're meant to be a nice jingle there. Greek likes these sound patterns. We're going to see it again here a bit later here with asunetus and asunthetus. So full of phthonu is envy, and phonu is murder. Eridos from eris, strife. Dolu, guile. Kakoetheas, well, it's having a wicked nature. And hence generally translated as spitefulness or maliciousness. And now he changes it to, so this I think is that's interesting, is this a nominative? I think it's, I think this could well be a genitive here, so full of spitefulness. And then he's going to move on to accusative plurals. So psithoristas, this is an onomatopoetic word. Psithorisma is whispering. You can hear the sound of it. Psithorisma, whispering. And this is first declension masculine noun. So it means whisperers in the sense of gossipers, backstabbers sort of thing. So whisperers, gossipers. Katalalus, slanderers, ones who speak against someone else, so slanderers. Theostoges. Now in classical Greek this word does turn up, and it means hated by, it is passive, hated by the gods. Most translators translate it as active, and here it probably is perhaps, God hating. Interesting, the Vulgate has aberrentes deo, so hateful towards God, so God haters, but in classical Greek it would be hated by the gods. Hubristas, well, it's insolent, has a sense of violence about it, so it's not just rudely insolent, but also there's a sense of violence about hubristas, again first declension hubristes. Huperephanus, this is huperephanus, this is it's a word meaning arrogant. Yeah, so arrogant. Aladzonas, these are boasters or braggarts. So arrogant, boasters. Epheurutas, again accusative masculine plural. An ephuretes is an inventor. So an inventor of evils. This is from F plus the heurisco root to find. So inventors of evils, apathes, disobedient, and then dative plural to parents. Asunatus again is from the alpha privative, and the sun ethos cognate with sun hiemi to understand, so ignorant. Asun thetus, sounds very similar, but this is a word meaning breakers of agreements. So faithless or breakers of covenants. The word does occur in the Septuagint a few times. So breakers of covenants. Astorgus, alpha privative connected with that root stergo, to be kind to. So lacking in any kindness or care or concern for someone. It's unloving, sometimes translated. Stergo can be used of love. It's never used so in the New Testament. It's generally the idea of showing kindness to someone. An eleimonas, again alpha privative, and that root for pity, so without pity. Hoitines ta dikaioma to theou epignontes, hoti hoi ta toi auta, prasontes axioi thunatu asin, umonon auta poi usin, alakai son eudokusin tois prasusin. The very ones who, having known, having understood, it's a very strong word from epignosko, to have to recognise, perhaps recognise is generally good. So having recognised top dikaioma, the ordinance, the declaration that something is just, it's hard to get into English, so the ordinance of God, that hoi prasontes, those doing tatoiauta such things, are axioi, worthy thanatu of death. Umonon, not only do they poiusin outer, do they do them, alakai, it's a good idiom here, umonon alakai, but also son eudokusin, they agree with, they approve, from son eudokio, they approve or agree with the ones, takes a dative after the sun, with the ones doing them. So just to do that last bit again. So the very ones who, having recognised the ordinance of God, that which God declares to be dikaios, that those doing such things are worthy of death, not only do they do them, but also they agree or approve those doing them. And that is the end of chapter 1.